it is 7 o'clock, we're going to go ahead and get started because I have a lot to cover. My name is Nicole and I am the Green Crew Program Manager at Sustainable Claremont. I consider myself an intersectional environmentalist and live very low waste. I want to note that this will be recorded and we are going to be posting it to our YouTube channel. So if there's something that I put on the screen where it may be something like, oh, these are different stores that you can shop at, have your phone handy so you can take a picture, or you can refer back to the recording later on YouTube. All right, so here's just a little overview of what we're going to go over. First, we're going to talk about big systems, mindset changes. Then we're going to go into how do you start to live more consciously and where do you start? And then there's different topics that we're going to go over and swaps in those categories. And then we're going to do questions. All right. So ironically, I kind of don't like the word sustainability because I feel like for a lot of people who don't truly understand it, their eyes kind of glaze over and they just don't get it. But really what sustainability is it's about less consumption, valuing our shared resources and connecting with our home, and really about us sustaining ourselves on our planet. So something that I always like to say is that we are nature and we are the earth. We are not separate from it. The earth is where we come from, it's where we will return to. So really caring about our home is caring about us. All right, so a lot of things that I'm going to talk about are going to require varying degrees and types of privilege. Some of the privileges that they may require is your location and physical access to things, the privilege of being able-bodied, the privilege of having time, and then of course your socioeconomic status. Although I will be focusing mostly on free things that you can do or swaps that replace items that you already continually buy, like soap, or for example, if you buy Ziploc bags, things like that. We always want to make sure that we are just doing what we can with what we have where we are, and as long as we're trying, that is what is most important. And this is a quote that I really like. It says, "He who buys what he does not need steals from himself." All right, so hyper-consumerism, something that is really ingrained in US values. We're constantly taught that we need to be constantly buying items. If we're upset, retail therapy, buy something. If we need something and we only need it for a few instances, buy it. It's very hard to unlearn this way of thinking and takes a lot of practice. I've been trying to fight against hyper-consumerism for probably about 5 years, and it's still definitely a challenge for me when I see something that I want to buy and like I have the instinct to purchase it, but I have to pause, think about if I really want the item, and we're going to talk a little bit about how everybody can get into that. All right, so before you buy something, you want to make sure you're asking yourself a variety of questions. First is, of course, do you really need it or want it, or do you have something already that can suffice instead? For example, if you want to make banana bread and you don't have a loaf pan, do you have a muffin tin instead that you can use? If you don't have something that you can swap for, can you borrow the item? Next, will you want the item in 5 years or 10 years? I think this is a really big one when it comes to clothing because trends are constantly pushed on us. And it's important to think about, are you going to want to wear this down the road, or is it just a momentary thing? Are you buying this as retail therapy? Is there something else that you can do to kind of feel that sadness or whatever you're experiencing? Are you buying the item just because it's on sale? I know personally, me growing up low income, this is something that I always have to work on. If something is on sale, I kind of have the instinct to buy it because I'm saving money. But you save a lot more money if you just don't purchase the item. You want to next ask yourself, who made the item? Were they treated and paid fairly? And then what is the end life for the item? Is it going to decompose naturally back into the earth, or is it going to be polluting? Everything that we create and consume is either going to end up as pollution or it's going to return naturally.
Hey, Nicole, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but do you mean to be screen sharing right now? We don't see any slides.
Oh my goodness. Okay, yes, I do mean to be screen sharing.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. No worries. Okay. I don't know what I was screen sharing previously. I don't know what happened. Thank you for letting me know. I don't know why. says I'm sharing. Okay, is it there now?
Looks good. We can see
Yeah.
it too.
I didn't unclick it before when we were talking, so it's really... So let me go back to this slide. So everybody can read that quick little picture on the side that I have while I get some water. Okay, so we didn't go through too many slides. So next you want to ask yourself, if you still think that you want to purchase the item, can you get it secondhand? We're going to discuss various avenues in which you can acquire secondhand items in a bit. And then can you wait a month before you buy it to be sure that you really want something? This is definitely something that works for me. If I see a clothing piece that I want, I make myself wait at least a month. And if I still want it, then I will go ahead and purchase it. And then this little graphic on the side is like the hierarchy of needs, a play on that. So you want to first use what you have, borrow, swap, thrift, make, and then buy if you have to. This is also something that I really like to tell myself, which is imagine all your waste was put back in your space. So imagine we didn't have landfills and all the trash that we created had to go into our backyard. I think if that were the case, a lot of us would think a lot more about what we are consuming and be a little prepared when it comes to that, which I will talk about ways to do that. All right, and this is just a question. Obviously, I'm not going to ask for anybody to answer it, but how much trash do you think the average American makes each year? Actually 1,642 pounds of trash, which I don't know about all of you, but that is a very astounding number to me. All right, so who does our pollution impact? Disproportionately, it affects Black, Brown, and poor communities in the US and abroad. This is because minorities and low-income communities are often seen as a path of least resistance because they have fewer resources and political clout to oppose the siting of unwanted facilities. So this is also definitely something that I think about. I think in our world, it's very easy to be overwhelmed and to feel like your personal impact does not make a difference. But what I like to do is think about how my actions are affecting my local community as opposed to thinking about the very big picture. So you may think, oh, what does it matter if I carpool or if I take public transportation, if everybody around the world is flying and using all this gas, but you using a car less directly affects your community and makes less pollution for you and those around you. So things like that. Making less trash means that there's less trash sitting in a landfill in a community near you, polluting, things like that. All right, and then this is also a picture. When I saw this, I was very shocked. This was actually taken in LA, across California. About 5 million people live near an oil or gas well, and 2/3 of those people are people of color. As you can see, that little boy is playing soccer and they are drilling for oil directly behind him. So like I said, we want to be thinking about how our actions are affecting our local community. All right, so recycling. I think everybody always likes to talk about recycling when they're talking about sustainability. But recycling actually has rules that we want to make sure that we are following, and they are different in every city. So you want to make sure that you are aware of your city's rules and that you're not what they call wish cycling, which is basically just throwing things in there because you hope and you wish that it's going to be recycled, but you don't exactly know if it is allowed. Recycled items are only recycled if somebody buys them. Recycling, like most things, is a business. So we want to make sure that we are adhering to the rules of the recycling facility. If we are putting too many non-recyclables into our bins, we are contaminating the load. And if there's too much contamination in the load, they're just going to send that whole entire truckload to landfill because it is not worth it to the recycling facility to sort out all of the things that they cannot recycle. So Claremont definitely has this rule: when in doubt, keep it out. And like I said, adding non-recyclables does more harm than good. On the side there, I have a list of some common items that are really not recycled in most places in the US. One is black plastic, and that is because the way our plastic is sorted is by beaming a light through the plastic and then seeing how much light is refracted back. Based on that, they know what type of plastic it is. Because the black pigment is too dark, the light cannot go through and it just deems it trash. So it's better to leave it out and avoid it. Plastic numbers above 5 are typically not recycled. Any type of plastic bag or mailer, if you are putting your recyclables into a trash bag and then putting that trash bag into the recycling bin, that whole entire bag is likely going to be sent to landfill because our recycling workers are having to sort through all of that, and the machine belts are just coming and coming super quickly. So they don't have time to grab that bag off the belt, open it, dump out the contents, and sort through it. There's already loads of things that are flying by them. So we want to make sure that our recycling is going in loose and we have no types of bags or films. Also, we want to make sure we're not putting in mixed materials because, for example, a piece of metal cannot be recycled with a piece of cardboard, or a plastic cannot be recycled with paper. We want to make sure that those are separate. Items contaminated with food, we want to make sure that our items are clean. They don't have to be spotless, but enough so that they are not visually very dirty or they're not contaminating other things. Styrofoam is basically not recycled anywhere in the US. I think there's only 2 facilities or something like that. It's also very tricky because, as everybody knows, it breaks up a lot. So that also causes contamination in the load. Shiny wrapping paper is not recyclable because it has plastic in it. You could tell by scrunching it up. If it stays scrunched up, it's most likely just paper and you're good to go. But if it starts to kind of expand again, it likely is coated in plastic and you want to put that in the trash, and just avoid buying it if you can. And then plastic utensils are not recyclable either. All right, so what's so bad about plastic? I think most people know that it's made out of oil. Also, that recycling for it is very limited. Like I said, recycling is only actually recycled if it's purchased, and oil is so cheap in the US that it's just cheaper for people to manufacture it as a virgin material as opposed to recycling it. It can also only be recycled a couple of times into a lesser material. I think they have improved in technology on this a little bit, but for the most part, a bottle cannot be recycled into a bottle. It has to be downgraded into something less, like polyester. It also leaches chemicals and greenhouse gases throughout its entire life cycle. So of course, creating it releases chemicals, and extracting that oil releases greenhouse gases, but also actually when the plastic is sitting in landfill, it's also off-gassing greenhouse gases. And then of course, it lasts forever. It does not break down. It just goes into tiny microscopic pieces that get into our bodies, our food system, and our water, which is what we do not want. All right, and then we're going to go a little bit more into styrofoam. Styrofoam is bad because of all those reasons I listed, plus the fact that I said it breaks apart very easily, and also because it's light, it's very easily carried by wind. So maybe when they're dumping the trash trucks, or if you put it in an outside trash bin, it's very likely that it can be swept up and it can go into a storm drain and then go into the ocean. The 2 main chemicals in it are also carcinogens, meaning that they cause cancer, and those chemicals leach into basically everything, but ironically, especially hot and greasy food, which is basically what is always put in it because you're usually getting takeout. And then production of it was listed as the 5th largest source of hazardous waste in 1986 by an EPA report. And I think, as everybody knows, we started using disposable plastics a lot more since 1986. So you can imagine what that number is now. And then because there are very few facilities, less than 1% is recycled. So it's really important to try to avoid it altogether. All right, so what about other materials? We want to make sure that we're choosing glass or metal when we can. Both of these are infinitely recyclable, and then also, in addition to that, it is a lot cheaper to recycle them as opposed to making virgin materials, so there's more incentive for companies to use it. Aluminum is also lighter, so you would want to choose that over glass. And if something is maybe made out of 100% recycled plastic, then that might be something that you want to consider because they are contributing to that circular system, and that would be lighter than glass. It's kind of something you have to weigh the pros and cons on. And here is another quote that I like. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself. I personally want to do both, but of course we can mostly just focus on what we can do and control. All right, so how do we start to live more consciously and integrate changes into our routines? Very slowly. Slowly, incremental changes are what are most likely to stick. I have been implementing the changes into my routine since really like 2017. So 5 years. And the reason that I am at the point that I am now, where I make very little waste, is because I just gradually started adding things into my routine. I started saying no straw, and then I started carrying utensils with me, and then I started carrying a container with me. So we'll get into that a little bit more. This is optional, of course, you don't have to do it, but it could be helpful to do a waste audit, which is basically you collect all of your trash for a period of time, could be week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever you want to do. And then you kind of sort through that and determine where most of your waste is coming from. And then that's a good starting point for you. All right, so we love secondhand. Secondhand is amazing because it saves tons of resources. And in my opinion, it makes me value items a lot more. For example, I needed a tea kettle. And of course, I tried to not buy new items. So I was looking on OfferUp and Facebook Marketplace, and I just wasn't finding one in like a color and a style that I liked. So after a few weeks, I honestly considered buying one new, but then I went to an estate sale. And of course, they only had one tea kettle in the house, and it happened to be one that I really loved the style of. And I was so excited. And now every time I look at that tea kettle, I feel much success, and I feel like that tea kettle was just meant for me. So I feel like buying secondhand makes you value something more because you cannot instantly purchase it, and also it makes you realize that items have a life, and them being of more quality is also very important. These are a couple different places that you can shop secondhand. And then of course we want to not forget that we have our community of our friends and our family to borrow from. I think a lot of times, at least I personally, forget that that is an option, but I think me myself, I am more than happy to lend things to people if they want to borrow them. And I think everybody can mostly say the same. And then buy nothing, which is something I will dig deeper to in a little bit if you are not aware of what that is. All right, and we love rehoming items when we are done with them. When we want to pass something along, we want to make sure that we are using the outlets that I just mentioned, or you can also just put it outside with a free sign, because a lot of thrift stores and places like Goodwill trash a lot of items. So we want to make sure that the items that we give away are going to somebody who will actually use and wants them. This little infographic that I made on the side has questions that are good to ask yourself when you want to get rid of something. And this was inspired by my mom posting in her local community group that she was taking donations for toys for a local foster center that had just opened for their waiting room for the kids. And tons of people donated boxes and boxes of toys. But I would say at least 85% of them were not usable, because it was something like a Nerf gun that didn't have the little pellets in them, or the item was broken or missing a piece. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times when we donate items, we do it to make ourselves feel good and kind of absolve ourselves of the responsibility of figuring out what to do with the item. But if it's not something that's usable and you're not able to use it, what is the likelihood that somebody else is going to want to purchase that at a thrift store? Very, very low. So you want to make sure that you are basically not donating junk. All right, and of course we love shopping local because it also requires less resources, and we are supporting our local community and economy. I also love shopping local and small because I am able to have more of an open dialogue with the person who owns or works the store. I'm able to ask them about sourcing, request improvements in the packaging. A lot of times when we're buying from a large corporation, you're not able to trace back where that product came from. And a lot of the time that is a problem because the people who are making the item are being exploited. All right, so Buy Nothing. What is Buy Nothing? Buy Nothing is a group of gifting communities via Facebook pages. You can look up Buy Nothing, and there's a website on there, and you can search for your local town or city to see if they have one, or you can just go on Facebook and look up Buy Nothing with your city after it. I know Claremont has multiple, Pomona, Laverne, San Dimas, Rancho Cucamonga, and I'm sure basically all the other surrounding cities. On there, you can post gives or asks for pretty much anything, including if you want to borrow something or if you need help with something and you need the ask of time. When you want to get rid of items, you just post them on there as a give, and then people will comment saying that they're interested in it. You pick somebody and then you can just put it out on your porch and they will come grab it. So it's very low maintenance, and it's also a great way to foster community. Here are some examples of some asks that I've done, and then one at the bottom that I really like that somebody else posted. But I went on a group camping trip that was really last minute, and I had basically no camping gear. And within 12 hours, I literally had everything that I needed to borrow. I've also asked for herb cuttings to start my own. And then there was somebody who asked if a stranger at a park could hold their dog's leash and while they left for 3 minutes so that they could test the dog for a canine good citizen test. And there was so many people who commented that they were willing to do it, which I thought was so amazing. And that is an example of a gift of time. All right, so before we get into swaps, you always want to use what you have first. That is the most sustainable and eco-friendly thing that you can do. And of course, that is what saves you money. All right, so here are some low waste stores that I know of. Some of these are local, like Grocery and Wild Terra. They are in LA. If you're ever out there, some of the other ones are online if you want to snap a picture of that, or like I said, it will be recorded and you can refer back to this on YouTube. All right, so first category, kitchen. So something that I always like to say is food waste is whack. One of the biggest sources of greenhouse gases that we make as consumers, besides our electricity usage, is our food waste. And food waste, when you think about it, you're not just wasting that piece of food. That piece of food represents fuel, water, labor, packaging, money, and lots more things. In the US, we waste about 40% of our food. And a lot of that is at the production, but also a lot, I think it's about, I don't know if it says it on here, but there's a pretty equal amount that is being wasted in production as well as in homes. So we're going to talk about ways to prevent that waste. You want to make sure that you're meal planning so that when you go to the grocery store, you know what you're going to make and make a list off of that and stick to it. You want to make sure that you're not going to the grocery store hungry, because that's when we tend to just throw everything in the cart and then we don't eat it. You want to make sure that you're storing food properly and that your fridge is well organized. Put the items that are most close to going bad at eye level so that you can see them. If they're shoved in a drawer somewhere, you're probably going to forget about them. And we want to use the whole plant. There's lots of plants where we could be using the whole thing, but we don't necessarily think about it. For example, strawberry tops. I started only eating them, I would say, a few years ago, because I was thinking, why am I putting this strawberry top in the compost when I eat lettuce, I eat spinach, I eat other greens? It's a green, so I might as well eat it. You can also use your herb stems. They have just as much flavor as the leaves, and you can use your citrus peels for zests or vinegars or solutions like I have on this slide. Before food we've made goes bad, or even our produce, we want to make sure we try to do these things on the list. You can freeze it, make a sauce, soup, pasta, or stir fry. Usually I'll tend to, if I have a lot of vegetables that are about to go bad, I'll make a big pasta that has basically everything in it, and it always turns out very good. You can also do baked goods. Of course, everybody kind of thinks about banana bread. I also make something that I call compost crisp, which is basically all the fruit that I have that is maybe doesn't have a good texture, or I think maybe within the next few days it might go bad. I just throw it in a tin, make a crisp, crumbly crisp topping, put it on, and it's always good and everybody loves it. You can also make a veggie scrap broth with even your onion skins, garlic skins, carrot tops, basically anything besides cruciferous vegetables. Just boil those and then add in some salt and you're good to go, and you have basically free broth. You can also get creative. There's carrot top pesto, DIY cleaners, vinegars, and you can try to regrow your scraps, like the green onions there on the side. I think my mom has about 6 green onions that she's been regrowing for probably 5 years, and they just continually keep shooting up, and she's never had to buy green onions again because they grow so quickly. Here's another slide that you can take a picture of. This is just examples of different items that should be in different places in the kitchen. And then, okay, so product dates on our food. We want to make sure that we know the difference of sell by, use by, and best by. So sell by is basically just for inventory purposes. It does really not mean anything when it comes to when you can consume the item. Use by is, actually, let's go to Best Buy first. Best Buy is when the item is at its peak and at the freshest, but that does not mean that is not good after that. I have literally eaten a can of beans that was 2 years past the Best Buy, and it tasted perfectly fine, like as if I had just pulled it off the shelf at the store. So that Best Buy is really only talking about when it's at its best, not when it's not consumable. The use by is the one that you want to follow a little bit more strictly, because it's typically for items that are more perishable, like say milk or meat or something like that. But again, or I should say not again, but all of these are actually not regulated by anybody. So you want to make sure that you are using your senses as well when it comes to the dates. So you want to look at something if it's past the Best Buy or sell by or use by. If it looks okay, you want to give it a little sniff. If it smells okay, then give it a little lick. And if it's good, then it should be likely safe to consume. Of course, you want to be a little bit more cautious with things, like I said, that are more perishable, but for the most part, you should be okay if your senses are telling you so. Trust your gut. All right, so compost. Why is composting so important? Composting is very important because nothing breaks down properly in landfill because there are not adequate conditions. There's not oxygen and soil for items to break down. So while they are kind of like decomposing slightly, they are creating methane, which is much worse than carbon dioxide. If you cannot compost in your backyard, we have a fee-based compost program, and at the end you receive some of the best soil that you will ever get. You can also take items to the Pomona Farmers Market. You can ask a neighbor maybe if they have a compost in their backyard that you can give their scraps to. And then there's also local farms or the sharewaste.com website where people will post if they take scraps. Of course, in Claremont and other cities, we're supposed to have the composting in our green bins, but that compost is being trucked miles and miles away to a facility that is really not going to be making good soil and really benefiting the earth as much as it could be if we were keeping our scraps locally. So that's something to think about when you are deciding what to do with your scraps. And then also I should note that on our YouTube, we also have a video about how to get started with composting, and there's a variety of different ways that you can do that. And of course, you can reach out to us if you have questions about how to set something up. All right, so kitchen swaps. I'm not going to go through this entire list. You guys can read it. But a couple ones that I want to touch on are stasher bags, which replace Ziplocs. Everybody who knows me knows I love a stasher bag. I think they're so amazing. You can bake food in them, you can boil them, put them in the microwave, put them in the dishwasher, freeze them, and they are a little bit more expensive up front. I usually buy them when they have a sale. They tend to have sales on Black Friday, Earth Day, things like that. And even though they are a little bit more expensive up front because you can reuse them thousands of times, they are actually cheaper than even buying disposable baggies from the Dollar Tree. Another thing that is great is a dish soap bar instead of liquid soap, because liquid soap is made from petroleum and also it's coming in a plastic bottle. So if you can use a bar, that's great. I use one from the brand No Tox Life, and I've actually gifted it to my mom, and she was very impressed by how well it cuts grease. And then another one I should touch on is bulk bins, buying items in bulk where you can use your own reusable bags instead of buying packaged items. These are a couple stores locally that have bulk bins. And if you don't have bags already that are suitable, there's lots of patterns online where you could just do very simple stitching and make one out of an old t-shirt or something like that. Or you can use brown paper bags instead of the plastic ones that are typically at the bins. More kitchen tips. You can reuse foil. Something is only single use if you use it one time. I will reuse my foil multiple times. And then once it is at its end of life, if it's clean, you can bunch it up into a tennis ball size, and that amount is recyclable. You can wrap leftovers in a towel or put an inverted plate like on the picture there, as opposed to using cling wrap. I think we all kind of tend to forget that back in the day, we really didn't use plastic. So there was different things and hacks that we had to do instead. So it's definitely something that used to be done a lot more, but is not anymore. When you're running the dishwasher, do that overnight because electricity is cheaper then. And then buy loose leaf tea instead of tea bags, except for the ones that I have listed at the bottom. Besides those brands and maybe like one or two more, most tea bags have actually plastic in the bag. And so when you heat them up, it's releasing that plastic and those chemicals, and you are drinking that. So I don't think we want to do that. That is why I love loose leaf. All right, next is body care. I'm not going to go through the list again. The two things I want to touch on are shampoo and conditioner bars instead of ones in plastic containers. Those are becoming a lot more popular and they work quite well. Also, a safety razor. I love a safety razor. I will talk to anybody about it, and I have converted, I think, 6 friends into getting one. I love a safety razor because it creates less waste, which you can see on the side there. The blade is just a traditional metal blade. These are the type of razors that used to be used instead of the plasticky cartridges. In addition to that, it's so much cheaper. I think I bought a package of about 100 blades, I want to say at least 4 years ago, and I'm still working on that pack, and it was only $15. And normally you can find a pack for maybe like $10. It was just a little bit cheaper because it was a variety of them, not one brand. In addition to that, the irritation is also a lot less because it's only one blade as opposed to multiple. Razor blades nowadays are basically feeding us lies and propaganda by telling us that more blades are better, because when you have more blades, you have more metal that is scraping across your skin and causing irritation. What you really just need is one blade that does its job. If you have one blade that does its job, you don't need multiple. And then here are some low waste brands that I know of and use. This is a slide where you can take a picture or you can refer back to it on our YouTube. And clothes. So we want to make sure, of course, like I said, we're using what we already have and we are caring for the items that we have. So learn to do some basic mending or find someone you know who is willing to help you. You can also ask for somebody to repair things on Buy Nothing. I've seen people do this before, and a lot of times people are more than happy to. Fast fashion has horrible consequences for workers and our environment, pollutes the air, water. Workers are exposed to lead and other toxic chemicals. They are not paid well at all. So we really want to try to avoid it. Also, fast fashion, of course, contributes to the idea of hyper-consumerism and that we constantly need to be buying stuff, which we do not. Also, there's a lot of waste from it, as you can see in that picture in the bottom. That is a desert in Chile where tons and tons of fast fashion items have been dumped there, a lot of them even with tags on. So we want to just try to push back against that system of overconsumption and overproduction by staying away from it if we can. And then, of course, choosing natural fibers over synthetics when we can, because synthetics are made from oil. I will say that I know it is a lot difficult if you are a larger size to find items that are made with natural fibers. And of course, that is just something that speaks to the privilege of certain things. So you can only do what you can. And we just have to push for systems to create more natural and more sustainable clothing that is accessible to everybody in all body types. All right, so laundry. I'm gonna play this video, bear with me. Let's see if I can get.
Let's talk laundry. Depending on how you do it, laundry can.
Stuart, can you give me a thumbs up or confirmation that you can hear it? Good? Okay.
Really pollute our air and water. Here are 7 tips to make your routine cleaner. Most also save money or extend the life of clothes. First up, the time you wash matters. Do laundry outside of peak usage hours to save money and use the cleanest energy. Tip 2. Turn most pieces inside out to prevent dye fading and damage to graphics. Large loads save electricity, but they should not be tightly packed. If your washer doesn't have a center agitator, clothes should still be loaded around the center. Basically, pretend you have one. Unless you're treating stains, wash on cold to prevent fading and save energy. This may be hard to believe, but you're probably using too much detergent, which can actually damage your machine and make your clothes less clean. Large loads only need 2 tablespoons. This is extra, but if you can, use a guppy bag, which prevents plastic fibers from entering our water. Put in anything made of synthetic materials. Basically, anything stretchy. Another way to prevent microplastic shedding is to buy clothes made of natural materials as much as possible. Stay tuned for part 2. We're talking stain removal and drying. Let's.
Okay, let me see if I can swiftly go back. Okay, is it back to the presentation? Good, okay. So in addition to that, we want to make sure that we are air drying as much as possible. This also makes our clothes last longer, doesn't create heat, and saves money. I think this is something that's definitely important in SoCal because it is so hot, as we know, especially during the summer. And the whole purpose of our dryers is to create heat, and we don't need more of that. So just stick your clothes outside, air dry them. In the summer, they're done in like 30 minutes, super quick. Also, you can use wool dryer balls. And I don't know if anybody noticed on the little end of the video, there's also stain sticks that you can get that are bars as opposed to buying shout or something like that. If anybody wants a specific link to that, I can provide it later. All right, so on the go, we want to make sure that we are traveling car free when possible. I try to abide by the 1 mile rule, which I actually learned of during one of our galas in the past couple of years, which is basically you try to travel car free if you are going somewhere that is within 1 mile of your home. So walking, biking, whatever it may be. Want to make sure that we're not idling our cars as much as possible. This is for a variety of reasons. When we're sitting, and if anybody doesn't know what idling is when your car engine is on, but you're not going anywhere. That is actually wasting gas while you're sitting there. Sitting there for 2 minutes is the same as driving 1 mile. So we're wasting our gas. Also, while we're sitting there, we're spewing out tons and tons of pollution into the air. And we are also creating heat, which contributes to that urban heat I was talking about. If you want more information on that, there's like an infographic I created that I can also share. But we want to make sure we're not doing that, and also spreading the information about that to others, especially for those who have small children, because a lot of idling tends to happen around schools, and it is the pollutants in our exhaust are most detrimental to little ones. All right, sorry, just realized my laptop is on low battery. So you want to make sure, or sorry, not that you want to make sure, but you can carry a set of reusable utensils and a jar with you when you're on the go. So instead of using plastic utensils when you're out at a restaurant, you can use your own. You also can get to go in your reusable container. Sometimes if a restaurant is not willing to put your food directly into the container, you can just ask for it on a for here plate and then transfer it. But I would say a lot of the time when I ask somebody to do that, they say, oh, I'll just put it into your container for you. So don't be afraid to ask. I've gotten so many things in my own container. I've gotten tea, tacos, even Jamba juice. Just of course, make sure that your containers are clean. And doing that is also, of course, preventing you from being exposed and consuming the chemicals that are in the containers that are usually at restaurants. All right, so festivities. You can buy a set of reusable silverware and plates that you kind of pass around as a community resource to those in your family. If you maybe only have events a couple of times a year, then you can just switch off on those, share the cost on that. There's like the metal ones you can get that are super sturdy and durable. You can also ask people to bring their own if you think they would be willing, even maybe just like, hey, can you bring a jar so that you could put your drink in it, as opposed to us using the plastic cups that are not recyclable. Don't use balloons, use natural paper decorations like the examples I have here. You can also create confetti out of dried leaves with a hole punch, or use dried flowers. And when you have drinks, be sure that you save the ice and use that to water your plants once it's melted. All right, so gifts. Gifts do not have to be physical items that you purchase, and we really don't have to give gifts if we don't want to. Go out and have a meal with somebody to celebrate something, as opposed to thinking that we always have to buy something. This is, again, the hyper-consumeristic values that are kind of ingrained in us and makes us think that we need to constantly be buying things for people, but we don't. You can do things like giving the gift of your time. You can offer to babysit, fix something, maybe spruce up the yard for somebody. You can create something like a playlist or a baked good. I always make my brother a playlist for Christmas or his birthday, and he always loves them. There was at one point, because he's a teenager, so kind of hard to gauge what he likes and doesn't like. But there was one time where I did not make him a playlist for his birthday. And then a day or so later, he asked me, did you make me a playlist? And I was like, oh, okay, so you do value the playlist that I make you. So things can definitely hold a lot of sentimental value and be valued by people that are not physical items. If you still want to buy somebody something though, ask yourself first if they will actually use or want it. And don't be afraid to just ask them. Ask people what they want. I think people love receiving items that they're actually going to use. I think we can all relate to receiving a gift that we just really don't want and we have to figure out what to do with it. And I don't think that's a gift, giving somebody something that they have to figure out what to do with. All right, so these are random things that don't really fit into a category. You can request plastic-free shipping when ordering online. This is, of course, going to be when you order more from like a small business. But I have a note. I have a note in my phone that has different scripts for different things. So one of them says something like, "Hi, can you please not ship with any plastic or use reused materials? I don't really care what the shipping looks like. I care more about saving resources." And a lot of times they will abide by that. I also have a prompt that says that I would like to be unsubscribed from email lists or from junk mail, and we'll insert our home address. And even if it takes you, say, 5 minutes to look up the confirmation or the contact information for that place that you're receiving junk mail from, that 5 minutes is going to be much more worth your time than having to constantly recycle that mail that you keep getting and being a little annoyed by the fact that they keep sending it to you. You also want to make sure that you're deleting items in your cloud that you don't need. All of our data is stored on huge servers that take up tons and tons of energy, and these servers are actually mostly in the ocean. And also something that I love is foraging. It's a great way to eat locally grown food that has very minimal negative impact. You want to make sure, of course, that you're harvesting things responsibly and know what you're eating. We've done a few events on foraging. We have a dialogue up on our YouTube that you can look at, and hopefully we'll have some more events in the future. If you're interested in those, you can reach out to me or just keep an eye on our events. All right, something that is super specific to California, conserving water. If you don't know, we're in a very huge drought. I don't know where you've been, but basically the whole entire part of the state is in the most severe category of drought or the second to most severe category of drought. And our water sources are becoming unreliable. And of course, with our climate crisis, it's just going to continue to get worse. So we want to make sure that we are getting into the habits of saving water now. So when we are rinsing dishes, we don't want to just continually have the water going. We want to use just a little bit of water and rely mostly on our sponge or our brush to scrape off the food. Of course, first you want to scrape it off into the trash before you even do that. When you are rinsing, if the water is not actively touching something, turn it off. Also, not everything that we use needs to be rinsed. If you use maybe a tablespoon to scoop out some baking soda or something like that, you don't need to wash that. You can just wipe it out with a paper towel and it's still clean. Wash fruits and vegetables in a basin like the picture there, as opposed to running them under the water. Do not use water to defrost frozen foods. If you can think a little bit ahead, dethaw them in the refrigerator overnight. If you have to use the water, of course, use that to water your plants. And then keep drinking water in the refrigerator instead of letting the faucet run until the water is cool. This also applies to heating water up. Heat it up with a kettle as opposed to letting it run until it gets hot. Other things you can do, keep a bucket in the bathroom to save shower water. Also think about the fact that your shower probably heats up a lot quicker than you think it does. So try to time it and see how long it takes, and then use that as a basis for every time you take a shower so that you're not letting it run. Of course, this is a basic one. I think everybody knows, not running water while shaving or brushing your teeth. Wash the car with a bucket, or consider going to a car wash where they actually recycle the water. A big one, everybody who knows me knows I'm very anti-lawn. It does not provide us basically any benefits unless maybe you have some kiddos that are outside running on it or you have pets, but there is native lawn cover that you can use. If anybody wants resources on that, you can reach out to us. And yeah, grass really just doesn't provide us any benefits. It takes so many chemicals to upkeep. We have to mow it, and that is causing concentrated air pollution around our homes because lawn equipment is really not regulated like cars are. So the concentration of the exhaust is so much more. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing our trees and our native plants that use less water. And then, of course, trees that provide us so many benefits. And we want to make sure we're using mulch for our trees. Mulch should not be touching the trunk, though, because the mulch keeps in water. Check and repair leaks, and never hose down the sidewalk with a hose. Use a broom. All right, and that's it. What time are we at? Oh, I was right on time. So these are just some recommendations that I have for books, podcasts, accounts, and people that influence me. If anybody, this will stay up while we do questions if there are questions. And yeah.
Hey, Nicole, just really quick, I think Mel had a question pretty close to the beginning of your presentation about what to do with old electronics, phones, computers, chargers. But I think between Nora's comments and mine, I think we found the solution to that. There's a county schedule that has e-waste drop-offs for those. So Mel, I hope you saw those in the comments, and we can throw those into the notes on the YouTube too. Oh, there's Mel.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
I also just realized something else. This is not applicable to your question, but something else that I should have included in the presentation, but I forgot to, is that the gas that we use in our homes is toxic to our health. So we want to make sure that we are not leaving our burners on if we have a gas stove longer than they need to be on. And we want to consider using electric or induction if we can. And actually SoCal Edison actually has a program where you can rent an induction cooktop from them to try it out if you would like, and they will bring it to your house. And I recently saw them at a conference and tested out the induction burner, and it was crazy how specific you can get the temperature and how quick it heats up and effective. And I think there's a lot of misinformation about how good induction is and just basically propaganda warning against it. But that is definitely something to consider, and make sure you're not using gas excessively or having it on if you don't need to have it on.
And then there's another question, Nicole, from Denise about your opinion on electric or propane cars.
Ooh, okay, yes, that one's a very complex and nuanced question, like a lot of things. So my opinion is that, I mean, using what you have, of course, like I said, is the most sustainable thing. So as long as your car is not a huge gas guzzler and you're not idling, you're using it efficiently, you are walking and using public transportation as much as you can, then you want to make sure that you, then I would recommend just using that car. Of course, the problem with electric vehicles is the mining for it, but I know they are working on making the batteries 100% recyclable. So that is something that I think we as consumers need to advocate for and contact our representatives about for funding that and getting that going. So like I said, this is a very nuanced topic. Because of that, also we have the problems with our electrical grid and being able to handle that. So we also need to be advocating for that to our representatives and demanding basically that we want them to institute more natural sources of electricity so we do not have problems like we did, was it last month when we got that message on our phone about how we are close to having rolling blackouts. So definitely a tricky question. I hope that answered it. Very nuanced. And I think really the solution is for all of us to push for electric battery recyclability to improve and for that to be subsidized like oil currently is.
Great, Nicole. And then really quick, in the comments, I included 2 links. One was for the current recycling guide for guidelines for the city of Claremont. Nicole had a good slide on that, but just in case there's any specifics, that's in the comments. And then also a link to SCE's induction loaner program. So if you want to check that out, again, there's a link there. And then there are two quick questions in the comments, but before we get to those, I have a quick question for you while I'm already talking, Nicole. Do you have like, you have all these resources, these book recommendations, podcasts, accounts, like what is like of those for somebody who's like just sort of getting into, you know, low waste living or, you know, environmentalism, like what's like, is there one podcast that you could recommend the most, or like an easy account that you would, your first go to for a suggestion for somebody who's looking to kind of become more informed or more active?
Yeah, I think for the books, Grading Sweetgrass is definitely one that speaks to us, kind of viewing ourselves as part of the earth, like I said before. And the Intersectional Environmentalist is a good one because it kind of breaks things down into really easy to digest topics. How to Save a Planet is a good podcast. And then try to pick from those accounts on the side. These are all Instagram accounts, and a lot of them do have websites as well. But the Intersectional Environmentalist is a good one. Zero Waste Chef is great if you cook. She has a lot of great tips. The Trash Walker, this is somebody who lives in New York and she dumpster dives. And it's amazing the stuff that she pulls out, and the things that stores toss is crazy. So that's a little hard. I would say all of them. But yeah, those ones I would say are good. Impact and Future Earth are also good. They have very good infographics on there. They're all kind of specific, I would say, different categories.
Okay, great. And then one of the other questions, I suspect you won't pick one or the other, but another question from Denise says, do you think it's better to live minimally? Oh, I misread it. Do you think it's better to live minimally and do tiny home living? Separate movements, or do you see a lot of overlap?
Yeah, I think it kind of, that's going to be different for everybody because it really fits your lifestyle. And if you have kids, that's probably not as accessible to you. And yeah, it kind of depends. I mean, I guess if you're having less impact, then that's great. And I think that whole movement kind of fights back against hyper-consumerism and having lots of things. But if it works for you, then yeah, I would say go for it. As long as you're not like consuming a ton of new resources to set everything up, that might be something to consider. But like I said, do what you can with what you have where you are. That's all you can ask of yourself. And everybody is going to have a different situation and different privilege of being able to institute different things.
Okay, great. And then Mel had another question here. What can we ask our local city and state representatives to do to increase recycling?
Are you talking about recycling in general, Mel? Or
Yeah, to broaden the adoption of recycling, it seems to me it kind of waxes and wanes. They seem to go one direction and then another, and maybe that's a reflection of the market for recyclables. But it's frustrating for people that are trying to recycle the directions and what's included.
yeah. I will say that's really not in the city's control. Like I said, it's basically just because that's the way the industry is, and because of the fact that oil is subsidized in the US, so it's cheaper for them to create virgin materials. So that's why it's really important to focus on the production of consuming things as opposed to the recycling, because of course when we are recycling, of course it's a good thing, but we are still using more resources to recycle something as opposed to just not using it in the first place. So something that I would love to be done is to urge cities to implement programs where restaurants more widely accept containers to be used for food and things like that. And also just the reduction of handing out plastic bags and utensils and things like that. So yeah, I would say advocating for more programs where we're reducing as opposed to recycling, because it does really just depend on the market, and the city doesn't really have wide control over that. I don't know, Stuart, is there anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, you know, it's really tricky because so much of this is driven by, you know, the recycling contractor that the city uses, whether it's Burtech or Waste Management. And all of those companies obviously have their own standards based upon what the market looks like. And a couple years back, just before COVID, we went and visited the recycling center, the MRF, that's run by Waste Management. And it was jarring to see them sort through the recyclables. And they also had tons and tons and tons of bales just sitting that they couldn't find a buyer for. And so I think part of it is, the market, as you say, it sort of waxes and wanes over time. And so these, they had storage containers full of glass that they couldn't sell to be recycled because, there wasn't a strong market for that at the time. And they were hoping things changed. One of the individuals that I talked to about this, who works in like the corporate side of recycling, was talking about, and Nicole, this sort of goes to what you've been speaking about, is pushing companies to integrate reusables into their product line. So for instance, like if you have an Nespresso machine, they come in these stupid little pods, kind of like the Keurig pods. Keurig pods are not recyclable. They go to the trash. Nespresso pods are taken back by Nespresso and recycled. They give you a bag, you put it in there, it's prepaid postage, and you send it back to Nespresso. So it's not maybe the best case scenario, but I know that there was a movement by like Dreyer's ice cream to have like metal ice cream tins, and they send you that and you send back those tins. And so I think it's sort of an all of the above type approach, but it does seem very market driven, like supporting those companies that are trying to do the right thing and trying to use less of those things that just aren't easily recyclable. But unfortunately, I don't think it's the easy answer. Okay, sorry, let me go through, and I think we maybe got one more question, Nicole, and then I think we're just about out of time here. So we've got a question from Melissa, and it says, is it better to drive far to buy in bulk? This is a good question because there's not a lot of local places. Or to just buy what you can, locally closer to home. So maybe if the choice is between driving to Riverside or LA to get bulk, no, plastic, or walking across the street to Sprouts, like, how do you make that decision?
Yeah, I definitely think it's better to just buy locally if you have to, as opposed to going out of your way. But like if you can take public transportation to go to LA, then I will kind of like integrate it into my fun plans that I have. But there is a lot of places locally that have bulk that you wouldn't think, like Sprouts has even bulk spices, they have bulk teas and lots of things, beans, flour. So that is definitely an option that is local to us. Also, Winco is another great option, and they have tons and tons. I think they have like dog food, they have cereal, they have chips, I think they have hot Cheetos, flowers, chocolate. They have so much stuff. So there is definitely options here. I would say more of what we don't have access to more locally is things like bulk soap and things like that. So that's kind of harder. That's when I would say maybe look into maybe buying like those the soap sheets that they have, or things like that. I personally have been working through a thing of soap that I got at Costco before I was even into really reducing my waste. And because I only do large loads and I rewear my clothing as long as I didn't like wear it out somewhere that's dirty, I have been working through it for, I want to say, 4 or 5 years. So it's all about just using what you have. And yeah, I would say it's better to buy locally or just kind of integrate it into your trip if you can. But for food items, we have a pretty good amount of things close to us.
All right, I think you got to all the questions, Nicole, so thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email me. And thank you for joining. Hope you all have a good rest of your evening.